Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Meme Policeman YouTube channel. For those who aren't familiar, the Meme Policeman is a fact-checking site which specializes in taking on memes from social media. I've had a lot of interest in branching out and doing a video, so hopefully you enjoy this. If you do, be sure to click subscribe, and I'll try to get some more videos out in the future. In this episode, we'll be tackling this popular meme from the other 98%. It was posted last May 18th, 2018, and it quotes the actor Jeff Bridges saying 35 million people in the US are hungry or don't know where their next meal is coming from, and 13 million of them are children. If another country were doing this to our children, we'd be at war. This did get a lot of traction on social media. This particular post received a great number of likes and shares, and of course they're shared on other pages as well. And of course Jeff Bridges himself is a famous actor. For those who don't know, he played the dude on The Big Lebowski, and he's been in a bunch of other movies as well. So, major actor, carries with him lots of influence. If you're on the political right, you're probably rolling your eyes right now at this meme or wanting to dismiss its claims. And if you're on the left, maybe you're sympathetic to it or tend to want to believe the claims. What I'm going to do in this video, though, is to show how I tackled it and the process and sources that I use to find out if there's any truth to this claim. So let's begin with a generic Google search. I typed in 35 million hungry US, and we can see the first result that comes up is from the Cato Institute. It says starve for good data, 35 million not hungry. And the second result is also from the Cato Institute. It says 35 million Americans going hungry is baloney. So already not a good start for this meme. When the first two results basically say that it's BS. But there's a couple things to keep in mind here. The first is that the date on both these articles is from 2008, so already over a decade old. So that means it's not going to have any updated statistics or data to go on. Also, the Cato Institute itself is a libertarian think tank. Personally, I think they put a lot of good information and can be a good source, but definitely have a bias that you have to keep in mind as you do with any source that you use. But let's see if we can find something maybe a little bit more recent or mainstream before we go with the Cato articles. So let's continue to scroll down. See the next result. Oh look, the Meme Policeman. How about that? Now, anytime you see the Meme Policeman, definitely give it a click. You can always trust it. But, of course, when I was doing the research on this, that link didn't exist. So we'll continue down. Next, we got something from Reuters, which it's a mainstream source. It says over 35 million Americans faced hunger in 2006, USDA. Okay, so this actually agrees with the meme. And it is, though, from 2007, so even older than those Cato articles. But since it is a mainstream source that agrees with it, let's go ahead and click on that and see what they have to say. So this article from Reuters has the headline, over 35 million Americans faced hunger in 2006, USDA. Now, an important rule to remember in all your media consumption is to never trust the headline, and always read the article. Okay, headlines are meant to grab attention, drive clicks. Oftentimes they're not even written by the reporters themselves, so make sure you read the article and read it carefully if you want any hope of finding out the truth. This article begins by saying the US government said the number of Americans who went hungry in 2006 was held in check at 35 million people from the year prior. Okay, as we'll soon find out, this actually isn't even true. If we go to the next paragraph, it says the U.S. Agriculture Department said a total of 12.65 million households were food insecure, or 10.9% of U.S. homes, up from 12.59 million a year ago. And then the USDA defines food insecurity, its metric for measuring hunger, as having difficulty acquiring enough food for the household throughout the year. And a little bit lower reads overall 35.52 million people, including 12.6 million children, went hungry, compared with 35.13 million in 2005. Okay, so that's where that appears the meme gets its 35 million and 12 million children number. Now, if you're a savvy reader, something doesn't quite add up here. Looks like the article is conflating two different things, which is hunger and something called food insecurity. If you look at where they actually quote the U.S. Agriculture Department, they say that 12.65 million households were food insecure. And then throughout the rest of the article, the reporter throws around the word hunger, but nowhere do they actually quote the USDA as saying any number of people were hungry. So this brings us to another rule, which is never trust a reporter's interpretation of data. Always try to find the original source, if at all possible. So that'll be our next step, is to find out what the heck food insecurity means. All right, let's start a new search. We'll type in USDA food security, looks like survey, and 2017 to narrow the search. And here it looks like the first result now is from the USDA, so this is good. We're getting to the original source we talked about. So go ahead and click on that. This brings us to the Household Food Security Report from the USDA. If we scroll down, looks like we can get the entire report or the report summary. When I'm first starting out, I like to go with the summary. No need to read through a long-winded report if you can find what you need with something shorter. This is the report summary. It's pretty short, just 2 pages long. You can go ahead and read through it on your own if you wish, but I'll just cover the highlights, what I found was relevant to this meme. In the section, what did the study find? The first bullet point reads, in 2017, 88.2% of U.S. households were food secure. The remaining 11.8%, 15 million households, were food insecure. Food insecure households, those with low and very low food security, had difficulty at some time during the year providing enough food for all their members due to lack of resources. And then the second bullet point there says 4.5% of U.S. households, 5.8 million households, had very low food security, down significantly from 4.9% in 2016. In this more severe range of food insecurity, the food intake of some household members was reduced and normal eating patterns were disrupted at times during the year to limited resources. Now, something that should stand out to us here is that at no point do they mention hunger or measuring hunger here. They just use the term food insecurity, which appears they break into two categories, low and very low food security. And the low food security just says that they had difficulty at some time during the year providing enough food for all their members due to lack of resources. But this is different than not actually providing enough food or not eating enough food, which is probably what most people would view as going hungry or truly not knowing where their next meal is coming from. And then the very low food security category. Now, this sounds a bit more like what going hungry might involve, because here they say that their household members reduced or disrupted their eating patterns. So, but this is a much smaller group. It's 4.5% of households instead of 11.8%, so less than half of the entire food secure group. And it also is still kind of vague about the definition. So what does reduced or disrupted eating pattern mean? Are we talking here like going from a large fry to a small fry, or is this a more significant food disruption? It's not exactly clear from this summary here. So to clarify this, we're going to have to continue our investigation. To find out exactly how food security is measured, let's type in USDA food security measurement. And that brings up an article from the USDA on measurement. Again, this is good. We got original source. We're not relying on another media outlet like Reuters to interpret it for us. We can see exactly what the USDA says themselves. This page details how the USDA measures food security. If we scroll down here, they say food insecurity is the limited or uncertain availability of nutritionally adequate and safe foods, or limited or uncertain ability to acquire acceptable foods in socially acceptable ways. In the next section, does USDA measure hunger? USDA does not have a measure of hunger or the number of hungry people. Whoa, this is important. USDA does not have a measure of hunger or the number of hungry people. Prior to 2006, USDA described households with very low food security as food insecure with hunger and characterized them as households in which one or more people were hungry at times during the year because they could not afford enough food. Hunger in that description referred to the uneasy or painful sensation caused by lack of food. And then in 2006, they introduced the new description, very low food security, to replace food insecurity with hunger, recognizing that although hunger is related to food insecurity, it's a different phenomenon. So they realized themselves that calling it hungry wasn't accurate, so they changed their metric. Now, so if we go back to that Reuters article, it's just plain wrong. I mean, so they're claiming here over 35 million Americans face hunger in 2006 USDA, where the USDA explicitly says USDA does not have a measure of hunger or the number of hungry people. So this is clearly wrong. So right now the only source we found that agrees with the meme is starting to fall apart here. So at this point we've pretty much debunked this meme. We found where they got the 35 million hungry number, and we showed that it wasn't actually a measure of hunger. In fact, the USDA explicitly says that it's not a measure of hunger. So we could end here and have a pretty solid bust, but I wanted to continue and see if I could find a actual estimate of how many people went hungry in the US by some sort of reasonable definition. If we continue scrolling down this article, we see that the USDA breaks up food security into 4 different categories: high, marginal, low, and very low food security. And when they refer to households that are food insecure, that's where the meme gets the 35 million hungry number. That's referring to the last 2 categories, number 3 and number 4. So let's take a look at those. Beginning with low food security, they define that as households reduce the quality, variety, and desirability of their diets, but the quantity of food intake and normal eating patterns were not substantially disrupted. So this is very important because it says that the quantity of food intake was not disrupted. So that's not how most people would define going hungry by any reasonable definition. There's a difference between the quality and variety of a diet and reducing the quantity as it relates to hunger. So, and keep in mind, this category, the low food security, made up the bulk of all food insecure households. Something like 60 or so % of that 35 million number fell into this category, which by any reasonable definition wouldn't be considered hungry. If we look at the last category, very low food security, they define this as at times during the year, eating patterns of one or more household members were disrupted and food intake reduced because the household lacked money and other resources for food. So this sounds like it could be a reasonable definition of going hungry, because they're now referring to reducing and disrupting the actual food intake. But again, it's a little bit vague here what they mean by reducing. Again, as I alluded to earlier, is this going from a large fry to a small fry, or are we talking about something much more significant? In order to clarify what these different categories actually meant, I had to do a little bit more digging. So if you continue scrolling down the article, eventually you get here to the actual survey questions which they use to assess their food security. And there are 10 questions which they asked each household, with additional 8 questions if the household had children. And these questions escalate in severity as you move down the list. If we begin with question number 1, it's the most mild. It asks, we worried whether our food would run out before we got money to buy more. If we go down to question number 3, it's a little bit harsher. We couldn't afford to eat balanced meals. And eventually by number 6, for instance, it asks, did you ever eat less than you felt you should because there wasn't enough money for food? And finally, the most severe, question number 9 asks, did you or other adults in your household ever not eat for a whole day because there wasn't enough money for food? Depending on their answers to these survey questions, households were assigned a particular level of food security. So for example, to be considered low food security meant they had to answer yes to at least 3 of these questions. And to be considered very low food security, at a minimum, they also had to answer yes to questions number 4 and number 6. So 4 asked if they had cut the size of meals or skipped meals, whereas number 6 asked, did you eat less than you felt you should because there wasn't enough money for food? So answering yes to both of those would put a household in the very low food security category, as well as the equivalent for the questions 11 through 18 regarding children. As I read through these survey questions, I was trying to determine which of them would show that the respondent was actually experiencing hunger by some sort of reasonable definition. And I think that only questions 7 through 10, and for the children, questions 15 through 18 meet that reasonable definition of hunger. Prior to that, they're just too subjective, too vague. By the time you get to 7, now they're specifically asking, were you ever hungry but didn't eat? So I think that's a pretty reasonable definition of hunger. And a particular note is the last 2, 9 and 10, which ask if anybody had not eaten for a whole day because there wasn't enough money for food. So now this is a much more significant level of hunger, so it'll be interesting to see how many people answered yes to that. Unfortunately, we can't actually see how many people answered yes to these questions on this page. This just tells you how they went about and measured it. So in order to see the actual data, we have got to go back to that household food security survey, which we were at earlier, only this time we're going to click on the entire report. So here's the full report. It is 44 pages long, but if we jump to page 13, there's a little section on what is very low food security. At the bottom here, we can see they have a chart which shows the responses to those survey questions that we were just reading. And remember, we were just looking at the last 4 questions, number 7 through 10. The light shaded line represents the very low food security respondents who answered yes. So if we look at the first question, they're hungry but did not eat. Looks like about 2/3 of the respondents answered yes to that. And then that other more serious did not eat for a whole day, which we were interested in, looks like that dropped down to about 30% answered yes to that. But remember that that light blue shaded line there only represents the percentage of the very low food security group, which in itself was a very small percentage of total households. It was just 4.5%, or 5.8 million households were in that category. So when we're saying that 2/3 of that group were hungry but did not eat, we're talking about 3% of total households which met that threshold of hunger. And then the more serious did not eat for a whole day, we're talking about 1% of all households which met that threshold. Now getting back to the meme, we've done enough research where we can now make a confident assessment here. We saw that the 35 million people hungry statistic was bogus. In reality, it's probably less than 1/3 of that number, which met a reasonable definition of going hungry. While this is still a significant number of people, if we put it into context, it's about 3% of all households that are experiencing hunger, with about 1% that are experiencing a more severe level of hunger. This leads to the follow-up question of why these households are experiencing hunger, particularly when there's the availability of programs like food stamps and soup kitchens and other charities. Are there other factors at work here, perhaps like addiction or mental illness, which is contributing to the problem? Are these simply ordinary people who've fallen on tough times or bad luck and ended up hungry? This goes beyond the scope of the analysis here, but definitely some good questions to think about. As it stands now, though, it's doubtful that anybody who's taken a look at the facts here would be so upset at the state of hunger in the US that they'd be willing to go to war. Thanks for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to click subscribe to this channel and I'll work to get some more videos out here in the future. Also, I link in the video description to the original post that I did on this meme, where you can find more information as well as links to all the sources that I used. Till next time, so long.